I'm thinking about people starting out, um, and you just want to have. I'm going to get technical for just a
Please
second.
do.
You want to have a good vector of your logo, and so all that means, if your listeners don't know what a vector might be, it just means it's scalable. So it's not a pixel based graphic. It's line oriented. It's object oriented. So it would scale up to a billboard or down to a business card. And also creating negative space around your identity system.
Oh,
That's really
yeah.
important. You don't want to let things encroach on your logo. And just think about how it's presented. So always having that high resolution file or that vector file out there. You can slap your logo on a lot of different things these days, and I wouldn't recommend doing that. Like if someone says, "Hey, we can put your logo on a rug," well, what does that imply? You want someone wiping
Okay.
on on your logo. So yeah, consistency is key. So like, let's say you're working with a service provider, like a screen
Sure.
printer, make sure they get that vector file. If you're working with a sign person, make sure they have that vector file. Also using consistent typography, and it can be
Mhm.
a serif, it can be a sans serif, but think about what what does that typeface mean?
Yeah.
you know
Yeah.
what does it elucidate? So if you're more formal, you may want to use a serif. If you're more modern or contemporary, maybe use a sans serif. But using that vector logo and using that consistent typeface in everything you do, and then it will be to the point where when people see a particular typeface, they'll even think of your brand without the logo, which is a pretty cool place to be.
Man, if you can get there, that's money. I love
Yeah,
what you said too about white space. I think white space in the world of graphic design is often like a great wine. You got to have it. It cleanses the palette. So when you do get that punch of color or that beautiful typeface or whatever it is you're going for, you can actually see it. There's nothing that personally drives me nuts more than I look at a business card and I just go cross-eyed because I'm like, do I look here? Do I look there? Do I look there?
yes,
Do I look
yeah,
there? And you're like, I get that you want to share all that, but I'm not seeing anything because my eyes are just crossing and I have nowhere to land when
yeah.
I look at something. Or billboards, I feel like are notorious for that. Like, oh, we have this much space. We're going to fill it with everything under the sun. And you're like driving by and you're like, like
Yeah,
your brain just is like, system shut down
yeah,
because you just can't get there.
that's
Talk
right.
about building your brand. And we always segue into some of the personal parts of business because we are holistic beings. How do you build your brand if you're listening to this and you're part of a firm and you're saying, well, my name isn't on it. I love what I do, but I also want to have my own identity and be appreciated for my work. How have you been able to do that at your university,
Mhm.
walking your journey? And what would your advice be to other people who are in that same situation where they aren't standing here as a solopreneur or as the principal of the firm, but they very much want to still carve out that space, if you will?
Yeah. So most companies, if they're handling their image well, they'll have some sort of graphic standards manual.
Yes.
And so what you want to think about is, how can I be creative, but within those parameters. So
Mm,
when I was with Legacy Bank, I was sort of in charge of managing that brand, and it was a really delicate balance because we wanted to give each of our stores the ability to do their own marketing and not like come in heavy handed and say you can't do that, but also.
everybody wants a little autonomy in life. Yeah.
Yes, right, but also
Yeah.
make sure it's consistent. And so sometimes when you distribute a brand standards manual, people think, "Oh, I can only use this logo, and I can only use this typeface." Well, in reality, there's a lot of creative freedom you would have, in different campaigns you might run within that. So, um, when we had multiple designers on staff, I could tell which designer did which piece, but it was still within the standards. So,
Sure.
I think if you can think about your market in terms of segments, you might have someone on your team that really speaks in the vernacular of this particular audience. This person's 18 to 20. This person's going to hit that 50 to 60
That's a
demographic,
great point.
but it's still going to be with that same brand personality to it.
I think that's yeah. Well, and understanding there's value, not just that they may hit different people or different demographics or segments, but there's value in them doing so. And it's your chance to give them the freedom to do that because then you are in a position to capitalize on that value.
Yeah, yeah,
I think that's immensely important. Okay. So you're a dad of three girls
I am.
um, and you're out here doing design in
Mhm.
a different genre than, say, interiors, but still designing and being creative.
Yeah.
How are you keeping all the wheels on your bus, so to speak? How are you doing this out here and still finding time? One thing we always talk about is you can't pour out of an empty cup. We say it on
Yeah.
almost every episode.
Yeah.
For all of us creatives out here, the cup has to get filled before we can go out and create and do and be. And you've done some really cool billboards. Corey's done some
Thanks.
amazing billboards around Oklahoma that are just stunning. Where are you finding the time, the energy, and what places are speaking to you as you continue to fill up your cup?
Yeah. So, I mean, you did mention I have 3 girls. I'm 40 plus right now. I'll just say that. So,
Yeah, after 40, we all use the plus mark. It's okay. We don't have to get specific.
yeah, I think it's just being a little more intentional about which projects I want to take on, and
Mm,
also determining the why of that. So, I always tell my students, I want you to do free work. I don't want you to do free pitching or design contests or things like that necessarily, but
sure.
do some pro bono work that's just good for your soul. So maybe you're a part of a nonprofit or you're part of a church and you want to
Yeah.
do work for those organizations because you have something to offer to them. So that's actually counterintuitive. You would think doing more work makes you lose your soul or whatever, but like those are sort of enriching kinds of things to be helpful in those nonprofit spaces.
I love
Um,
that.
so yeah, so being kind of choosy about what you do. I think professional development is always important. So if you need to take a class or brush up on some software, that can
Yep.
be really good as well. So sharpening the axe from time to time is really critical. So um,
Hmm.
I and this sounds counterintuitive as well because you don't want to
No,
dwell too much on the past. But sometimes when you're in a really busy chapter of life, which I'm in that right now, I
for
kinda
sure. I
go
think we
back
can
and I look
relate.
at some of the old stuff that I've done. Some of it I'm really critical of. I'm like, "Ooh, that was garbage," you know? But some of it I think, that wasn't too bad." And you kinda give yourself like a little personal pep talk to say, "I've done some good work in the past. I'll continue to do good work, hopefully, but maybe in this chapter right now, it's just not a season where I'm feeling particularly productive." But that will come back because it ebbs and flows.
It so does. And I think giving ourselves the grace to
Mm,
hang out in that
yeah,
space